Please take a seat, or you can stand, whatever you want. All right, Parshas Sisa. This week's Parsha, we have the most tragic event in Jewish history, which was the Egel, the golden calf. So let's discuss what happened. We'll read the Psukim. You can follow along if you'd like, or if you could listen, whatever you want. And we're going to see that the way we read the Psukim, the way we read the verses in the Torah, it's going to come out a little different than, it's going to sound a little different when we approach it with the perspective of the commentaries and of the oral Torah. But we're going to see when we read the Psukim closely that everything that the oral Torah is saying, everything that the commentaries are saying is actually clear in the written Torah itself. That's why if you're not Jewish and you don't have the oral Torah, the Torah comes out a lot differently. But that is what we believe. So let's first read what happened. So we know after Moshe went up to get the Torah, the Jewish people got a little nervous because he wasn't coming down, and they built a golden calf, and Moshe dropped the tablets, and it was not good. Now, just had the Jewish people not worshipped the golden calf, just as an aside, world history would have ended at that point. Because we've mentioned before that the whole goal of human history is to reach a point, a spiritual level of Adam Harishon, of Adam before he sinned, before he ate from the tree of knowledge, which was a totally different level of existence, a much higher level of existence. So had Adam not eaten from the tree, he was on a much higher level. After the Jewish people got the Torah, they returned to that level. Except when they worshipped the golden calf, went right back. So had they not worshipped the golden calf, that would have been the end of days. Mashiach was here, everything was fine. All the Holocaust, Tafata, Chaptai Tzvi, the Inquisition, and the Crusades, all that would not have happened. Every tsar, every bad thing that we've had comes from the worshipping of the golden calf. So let's read the Psukim starting on page 492. Lamed Beis Aleph. Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe loredes minahar. The people saw that Moshe was tarrying from coming down from the mountain. Vayikahel ha'am al Aaron vayomru elov kum aseh lanu Elohim asher yelchu lefanenu ki zeh Moshe ish asher ha'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yadanu ma hayalo. The people gathered around Aaron and they said to him, "Let us make a god that he should go before us. Ki Moshe, who took us out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him." Vayomer Elohim Aaron. Aaron said to them, "Parku nizme hazav asher be'ozni nishechem. Go take the gold jewelry from your wives, from their ears, their gold earrings, b'neichem u'b'neisechem haviu elai, and bring them to me." These parku kol ha'am es nizme hazav asher be'ozneim, and they all took the earrings out of their ears. Haviu al Aaron, and they brought it to Aaron. Vayikach miyadam vayatzer oso b'charet vayasu egel masechem. With all that gold, he made a golden calf. Vayomru Ela Elohecha Yisrael, and they said, "This is your God, O Israel, Asher Halucha Meretz Yisrael, that took you out of Egypt." Vayar Aaron Vayiven Mizbeach, and Aaron saw, and he built an altar. Lefanav Vayikra Aaron Vayomer Chag L'Shem Machar. Tomorrow will be a holiday for Hashem. V'Yashkimu Memachras, they got up early the next day. V'Yalo Olos V'Yagishu Shalomim, and they brought offerings. Vayeshev Ha'am La'echol V'Shasu, and they ate and they drank. V'Yakumu L'Tzachik, and they got up to do schok, which is acts of sexual immorality. So, you read the Psukim, and their simple explanation seems pretty bad. But let's look a little closer and see what happened. So first of all, they made a mistake. They got really nervous. As Rashi says in 32:1, Rashi describes over here how Moshe was supposed to be up there for 40 days, but they miscalculated. So they miscalculated when he's coming back. They found Moshe is gone. So it wasn't like, first of all, that they were just rebelling, like, let's get rid of Moshe and let's not worship God anymore. They made a mistake, so they didn't know what to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they saw an image, what appeared to be on the top of the mountain, of Moshe dead. So they said, oh, Moshe didn't come back. We see an image of him that he's dead. So they got very nervous. They got very nervous about that. The Yetzer Hara was tricking them. So that's the first thing So it wasn't just like an open rebellion against that. Now, what's interesting also, I don't know if we've spoken about the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav were a group that when the Jewish people left Egypt, a bunch of Egyptians came with them. And they weren't from Jewish lineage. And they were came along. And they're called the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. And we find throughout Jewish history that they were always the ones who were causing problems for the Jews, the Erev Rav. Now, he brings a proof. They bring a proof from here. Rashi, it says, Eila Elohecha Yisrael. Behold your God, O Israel. Why are they saying, O Israel, like speaking to somebody else? It's like one group speaking to the Jewish people. The point is that it was actually the Erev Rav who were starting this, and they were not considering themselves part of the Jewish people to say, this is your God, O Israel. So that's another thing. It was the Erev Rav who started this. Now, the other people who didn't protest, they're just as liable. In general, if someone does something wrong and you don't protest, you can be held liable for that as well. It's not a good thing. Okay, now, if we look at Aaron here, it appears that Aaron was not doing a great thing. He helped them make the golden calf. But if we look closer, he was actually trying to slow them down. Now, why was he trying to slow them down? And why didn't he just say, stop what you're doing? Because his nephew already tried that, Chor. And what happened to him? They killed him. So he knew if he's just going to say, stop, don't worship this golden calf, that wasn't going to work. So instead, what he told them, in 32:2, he says, go to your wives and get their jewelry and we'll make a golden calf. So he said, go to your wives, because he knew the women didn't want to participate, and they didn't participate in the golden calf. So he told the men to go to your wives. He's trying to slow them down. First of all, you got to go home, and you got to say, hey, honey, remember that gold necklace I got you for Valentine's Day? Yeah, I need that to make a golden cow. So he was trying to slow them down. That was one thing. That's why the women didn't die in the midbar, in the desert, only the men. Because the women did not want their jewelry to be used for an idol. So this is another example of the righteous women. Actually, in Rabbi Vishnevsky, do you read Rabbi Vishnevsky's new book?
No.
Oh, he wrote a new book called, I think, Tell Me the Truth, To Tell the Truth?
Something like that.
Yeah. One's a talk show from the 60s, game show from the 60s, and one's his book. To Tell the Truth is the talk show.
Game show.
So I think his is Tell Me the Truth.
Okay.
Tell Me the Truth. So one of the things he says when people say the Torah is sexist, which he just brings this, I remember he brought this as an example that the Torah here is attacking the men and praising the women for their holiness and spirituality, that they did not participate in the golden calf. I just remember that. I just read the book a few weeks ago. So that stuck out. But he deals with a lot of these issues, and it's very interesting. Okay, also, he built an altar because it takes time to build an altar. Right? He could have just said, let's bring all of our sacrifices and do it right away. But he says, no, we're going to build an altar, and all of that took time. So basically, and actually because of this, the Medrash says that Aaron was rewarded for his conduct to get 24 priestly gifts. So Aaron was actually trying to slow them down. This is all from the Oral Torah, from the Midrashim, from the commentaries. If you just read the Psukim without the aid of that, you wouldn't know that. Now, I would like to focus now on two approaches which are really very similar, that of the Ramban and the Beis HaLevi. They lived hundreds of years apart from each other and hundreds of, probably thousands of miles apart, but they say similar things and different aspects of it. So I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with this, but I always like to go through it every year because the Ramban is a very essential commentary to the Torah, really flushes everything out and explains everything clearly. So first of all, he attacks Rashi. He understands Rashi holds that what the Jewish people were trying to do, what were they trying to do with this golden calf? So you read the Torah, it sounds like they were trying to bow down to it, like a regular idol. It was like a regular getchka, pick your favorite idol, and they were just going to bow down to it and make it a god. And he attacks Rashi for seeming to hold that. Others seem to defend Rashi, like, how do you know Rashi was saying that? The Ramban says that's not what they were doing at all. They were not trying to serve it as a god. Rather, they were trying to use the calf as an intermediary between them and God. And he brings several proofs from here. He said, this verse is a key to understand what the golden calf was about, and what the people were thinking when they did it. Now, they were saying that Moshe's gone, we need a golden calf. Now, did they ever think Moshe was God? They knew Moshe wasn't God. So if they're coming to say Moshe is gone, we need a golden calf, it's clear that they're not making a god, they're just making another Moshe. They needed an intermediary. That's what they were trying to do. He knows that it wasn't Moshe that brought the 10 plagues. It wasn't Moshe who split the sea. He was just the intermediary. If you look at the verse, what did he say? What did the people say? Make us a golden calf. That it should go in front of us. They didn't say, make us a god that brings life and brings death. They said that should go in front of us. So the Ramban says, if you read the verses carefully, it's clear. Right? Everything he's saying is clear in the verses. That's the beauty of the Ramban and all of the earlier commentaries. He didn't just discover America. All he did, right? He's not just, sometimes you have people, they say a nice shot. That's just really their ideas, and they try to plug it into the verses in the Torah to try to make it sound nice. The Ramban is reading the Torah carefully and saying, this is what it says in the Torah. Why does it say, Asher Yochel Lefanenu, to go in front of us? Because they weren't making it a god. They were just making it as an intermediary, because they had that connection, just like they had Moshe, so now they needed a golden calf. And it brings another proof. Later, when Moshe comes down from the mountain, he gets very upset. He asks Aaron, what are you doing? On page 498, and what does Aaron answer him? He says, Vayomer li, they said to me, this is Pasuk Chav Gimel, 23. Vayomer li, they said to me, Aseh lanu Elohim asher yelchu lefanenu, make for us a God that should go in front of us. He said, Moshe ish asher ha'alanu me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yadanu me'ha'yalanu, because Moshe, who led us out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. So if Aaron's response was, we were making an idol, that's not a defense, right? Moshe comes down, what were you doing? What were you thinking? We were making an idol to bow down to. It's like a weird answer. That's not what he was saying. If you read the pasuk carefully, he was saying, no, we were making an intermediary because the people thought you were gone, and we got nervous. Not chas v'shalom that we were going to bow down to it. And that was his defense. The Ramban continues, they didn't want a God that was going to create life and kill, and they weren't going to serve him. They wanted it to be in the place of Moses, something to lead them. And this is what Aaron was defending the Jewish people with. We didn't know if you were going to return, so we needed a substitute. Also, the Ramban points out, what happened when Moshe came down? They said, right away, we have to destroy this thing. And that's what they did. The people did not protest. If you just made a new God, and you really believed it was God, you would seemingly fight a little bit to protect your God. Well, why did the Jewish people do that? Elamai. They didn't really believe it was a God. So already we're seeing, and again, all of this is clear from the verses. Okay. Now, he also points out, why a cow? Why not a goat? Or a hippopotamus? Or an elephant? A dog? Yeah. Why not? A sheep? So you probably do. Probably do dogs. He writes because in Kabbalah, the Kabbalah very often, there's something called Ma'aseh Merkava, which speaks about Hashem's holy throne. I don't know anything about it. I just know that's what it is. And there's different animals on Hashem's throne. One of the animals is a cow. So the reason they specifically picked the cow was because since it's on God's holy throne, they thought that would be the perfect animal to serve as an intermediary between them and Hashem. So it wasn't willy-nilly. There was actually kavanah going into it. Also, the Rambam, this was all the Ramban. The Rambam says, now, if you're going to rebel, you would just rebel and fight and do whatever you want. Why did they go to Aaron, who was second in command and very knowledgeable, and ask him, we want to do this? Because they wanted his advice. What's the best way that we can replace Moshe Rabbeinu to get a connection to God? And the reason they went to Aaron was because he was second only to Moshe. He would know. He would be the one who knows how to forge this connection. So we're already seeing that the Jewish people, while they were definitely wrong what they did, we'll discuss specifically what was wrong now, they were not creating a God to worship, but rather they were trying to create a conduit to get them to connect to Hashem. Okay.
Were there cows in Egypt back then? I mean, cow is more like a...
I think so. I think it says, I don't...
The lambs, no?
Oh yeah, they worship the lamb. Ellie Stort's father went to Egypt years ago and took pictures of like big statues of sheep that they used to pray to.
That's all they had?
Yeah, I would guess that they had cows, but I can't.
And then the Hindu do cows.
All right, they're
Hindu cows.
yeah, they believe they're holy. But I think it also says that the Rambam says I said that right, that they left Egypt under the constellation of the calf. Right.
How did they even know that it was going to be a cow with dinar and just take the gold and throw it into the fire?
And then it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Ramban has a whole discussion here about, but that's what they wanted to make, it seems. It seems that there was a way. Look in the Ramban on Lama Beis Aleph.
How was it?
There seemed to be.
How was they just like steaks lots and say, no, this is our perfect meat.
Right.
Barbecue.
Okay. So I want to move on. That was all the Ramban. This is the Beis Halevi. The Beis Halevi lived a little more recently. In the 1800s, he was the Beis Halevi. Very big rabbi in Europe, Rosh Yeshiva, one of the Gedolim of the past 200 years. Okay, so he writes that, and he's going again on this theme. He says that all the mitzvahs that we do have an impact on the spiritual world. We know that every time we do a mitzvah, and every action that we do has impact on the spiritual world. We live in the physical world, but there are worlds and worlds above us that we can't perceive with our physical senses. We don't have the ability to perceive them, but we know that anytime we do a mitzvah, that will positively affect the spiritual world, and when we do a sin, that will negatively affect the spiritual world. So many of the Svarim speak about, that's why it's so important to be careful with our deeds, because our deeds have a real impact, even if we don't think, even though I'm just by myself, and me studying Torah right now, it's not affecting anyone in the world, but no, it has tremendous effects in the upper worlds, and makes very important spiritual things in the spiritual world. It's something we firmly believe. This idea in general should give a person a feeling of importance, that our deeds really impact things so much. So, he says, now, therefore, let's say you knew Kabbalah. I don't know Kabbalah, but let's say you knew Kabbalah. Kabbalah, part of it, is understanding the details of all of these spiritual worlds, and how they work, and how they interact. The Beis Halevi says, let's take an example. We have a Mishkan we learned about last week, 2 weeks ago, the Mishkan. The tabernacle where Hashem's presence dwelt amongst the Jewish people. So the Beis Halevi says, if you knew the Kabbalah and knew all of the details of the spiritual world, you could construct on your own a physical Mishkan to make Hashem's Shekhinah come down to the world without the Torah telling you how to do it. Right? You would know that making a plank of this type of wood would affect the spiritual world in that way. You would know that an ark made of gold with wood and gold, that would affect the spiritual world in that way. And you would know precisely how to fashion a physical Mishkan to bring spirituality to the world in the perfect way, without the Torah ever telling you how to do it. It seems like some of the Avos, some of our forefathers, before the Torah was given, they had this ability, and the Gemara says that they kept mitzvos before the Torah was even given. Right? Avraham Avinu ate matzah. Right, why do we eat matzah? You remember leaving Egypt. Well, there wasn't any Egypt yet, but he was still eating matzah. Why? Because eating matzah, in addition to remembering that we were slaves in Egypt, it also has an added spiritual component that affects the spiritual world in a certain way. So Avraham Avinu, for example, ate matzah. So the Beis Halevi says, if you were able to understand these worlds, then you could make a Mishkan, you could bring Hashem's presence. Oh, so actually, I quoted that earlier from the Ramban. I thought it was the Ramban, that they went to Aaron for direction on how to make it. But it's actually the Beis Halevi who says it. He says that's why they went to Aaron. They went to Aaron because they wanted to know what physical thing can we make in the world to bring Hashem's presence into the world. And again, that's why they went to the calf. The calf because it's on the throne, on Hashem's throne, on Hashem's Merkabah, his chariot. I said throne before, it's really a chariot. And obviously it's not a physical chariot, Hashem doesn't have a body. But that's what they were trying to do. So what's the mistake? It seems like a very nice thing, right? Let's build a golden... Moshe's gone. We see he's apparently dead on the mountain. We have no one to lead us. So let's go to Aaron, who is now he's just got a vice president, just got sworn in as president. Let's ask him what we should do. Right? We want to make something. So he says, you know what? what we should do, first of all, he was trying to delay them, but they had the proper intent. So he says a calf is what is on Hashem's throne, and that's what we should make. That will bring down Hashem's presence. So what was wrong with this? The Beis Halevi says a very fundamental point in Judaism. The issue was that when it comes to serving Hashem, we do what Hashem says. We don't make cheshbonos, what's called, what the word is. Cheshbonos means we don't make rationalizations. The Torah says to do this. It was clear they should not be making golden calves. But I think, if I make a golden calf, that'll help me connect better to God. That was their sin. They used their own intellect to say, in their mind, I think this is better to do. God says not to? No, in this case it's okay. He says, when you start making rationalizations and cheshbonos, that was their sin. That's what they did. And that, when you start doing that, you get in very, very, very deep trouble. And the reason is, now, what are you trying? It's also, Nefesh Chaim discusses this. Once you have a Torah, once the Torah is given, the only way to affect the spirituality of the world is by following what the Torah says. If you think there's an act that will bring down more spirituality to the world, but the Torah says not to do it, it will actually have the opposite effect.
But they didn't have Torah though.
They did, now they had it. This was after they got the Torah.
No, the golden calf wasn't that.
It was after. They already gotten its first two commandments.
Oh, the
First two commandments, right. And then he came down with the tablets and broke them. There was an exception. The reason I said that was because Yaakov married two sisters. The Torah says you're not allowed to marry two sisters, right? Back in the day you could marry many, many women if you wanted, if you want to get married like that. But you're not allowed to marry two sisters. But Yaakov did that. So the reason he did that was because he saw in the Kabbalistic worlds, in the spiritual worlds, that it would have a appropriate effect in the spiritual worlds by doing that. But Nefesh Chaim is very clear. Once the Torah is given, we don't make any of those rationalizations anymore. Yeah, it could be, in some level, it will affect something. Once the Torah says it, there's more destruction caused by not listening to what the Torah says. So, now, what was the... fine, that's what he says. Because they didn't listen to what the Torah said, they made their rationalizations. Now, what is the kapara for the golden calf? What's the kapara? No? Atonement. Thank you. Atonement for the golden calf.
So sharp.
Yeah, it's good. You're doing well in English. Atonement, I'm teasing. The atonement was the para aduma, the red heifer. And we know the red heifer is famous as being the mitzvah that is the quintessential chok, the quintessential mitzvah we don't understand. The atonement for the golden calf was to have a mitzvah which we follow, which we don't understand with our human minds. We don't understand how it works. We take on our trust in God, in that mitzvah. Now that's obviously not to say that every mitzvah is irrational. That's definitely not true. But there are certain mitzvahs, and the commentaries point out, the Beis Halevi points out, it's not even every aspect of the paraduma that we don't understand. It's only certain aspects of the paraduma of how it can, when you spritz the ashes on somebody, it purifies the one who is impure, and it makes the person who is pure impure. So that aspect we don't understand. And he says, since all the mitzvahs are interconnected, we can never totally grasp every aspect of the Torah because this part of the paraduma, this part of the red heifer, we don't understand. And since all the mitzvahs interconnect and interweave with each other, we really can't understand. We understand a lot of it, but we can't understand everything. And also, an atonement was the Mishkan, that we built a tabernacle after to atone for the golden calf. And he points out in next week's Parsha, it says every time they built something in the Mishkan, it says, Ka'asher tziva Hashem, just like Moshe said, just like Hashem told Moshe, just like Hashem told, over and over again. You'll notice in the Parsha, they did it just like Hashem told Moshe. They did it just like Hashem told Moshe. Why? Because the sin that they did was they made cheshbonos to say, I think it'll work better this way. And they didn't listen to what Hashem said. So in the atonement, which is building a Mishkan, everything it says, they did exactly like Hashem told them. They did exactly like Hashem told them. And, we see this. I remember when I did USY back in the day, and over locally, and the guy tells me, I don't think he was wearing yarmulke. I don't think he was the rabbi. I think he was the youth director. I was like 16, and I was just like learning about Yiddishkeit. And he says, we were talking about driving on Shabbos, and he says, it's more important to be with the Jewish community than it is to not drive on Shabbos. You shouldn't stay home. I was like, what do you mean? You're not allowed to drive on Shabbos. I was like, that's what the Torah says. And he goes, are you telling me that it's more important to stay home than to be with the Jewish community on Shabbos? I said, yeah, that's what it says. He says, God, am I right? God says I'm right. And that's exactly what he's doing, making cheshbonos. In his mind, the Torah says don't drive on Shabbos. That's what Hashem said. But he says, no, I think it's better that everyone gets together as a community. And da-da-da-da. Now, if you look around, look at his movement now. That was 20 years ago. His movement is not doing so well. Not that you need it as proof, but the numbers in the conservative movement have declined tremendously. He thought at that time, that was a great idea. It's much better for Jewish continuity to have Jewish people together on Shabbos. But we have to have faith in Hashem. There is a God. God gave us the Torah, and we have to do what God says. We don't make cheshbonos. He was right for many years. For the conservatives doing pretty well for the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now, if you just look around the local community, you see what's happening. I just on my when I ride my bike on the Henry Hudson Trail, I just passed by a Reformed temple. That's now a Korean church. So we don't make cheshbonos, and even if things don't work out, we trust in Hashem that it's going to work out. I remember some people often do this with outreach. They think, to bring someone closer to Judaism, you can violate the whole Torah, because in the end of the day, they'll keep Judaism. So I remember hearing from Rabbi David Orlovsky, who's a great speaker if you've never heard him. I've been trying for years to get him here, but he lives in Israel. It's kind of hard. So one thing that David Orlovsky said when he was in NCSY, there was always people that wanted to bend the rules a little bit, to have a better event, and it was for good reasons, to get people involved in Judaism. So he said, you know what? There is a God. We have to do what we have to do. We do what Hashem says, and then we believe that Hashem is going to help us when we do the right thing. We don't bend the rules to bring people closer, or even if the goal is a positive. We have a positive goal, we think it's going to work out in the end. No, we have to have the humility that maybe our thought process isn't the way to go, and that really we should be following, quote unquote, Hashem's thought process. Right? It comes with it's a good way to learn humility. If I just bend the rule a little bit, I'm going to have a massive event, and all these people are going to come, and they're going to keep Shabbos, and it's going to be amazing. Well, but Hashem said you can't do that. No, that's what you have to do. That's a tremendous schar to do that. That was just an example. I feel like it comes up there most often. Okay. That was that. I'll just say one more thing about the egel, one more thing about the golden calf. It says that they got up to do, maybe two more things quickly. It says vayashkimu, to worship the golden calf. They got up early to worship the golden calf. So that was a taina on them, that they rushed to do the sin. We don't realize, sometimes we think, you fight, you don't want to do a sin, whatever it is, you don't want to, my favorite example, going to Wendy's after the shiur to get a bacon cheeseburger. So there's a difference. I'm not saying I was doing this, but I know their dining room is open all night. I pass by all the time. It says. So there's two ways to do it. You could drive 60 miles an hour down Union Hill Road and then 80 on Route 9 to get there in about 4.5 minutes. Or you can say, I can't overcome the sin right now, but I'm going to drive 40. I'm not going to rush to do it. There's still, if you can't win the major battle, if you can't win the war to not do the sin, at least do it slowly. There is something, and we say it on Yom Kippur, one of the things we ask forgiveness for is that I've rushed to do sin. So, okay, nobody should sin. I'm not saying anyone should sin. I'm saying, but if it happens, at least do it slowly. That was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that it says the people, when they had the golden calf, they got up to L'sachik, which it says is they committed acts of sexual immorality. The Gemara says, the Jewish people know that idolatry is meaningless. Has nothing to it. But the reason they do it is because they want to allow acts of sexual immorality in public. People use a belief in, nowadays it's more atheism than idolatry, but a belief in that there's no God, right? That there's no supreme being who demands us our proper behavior. They really don't want to worship the idol. What they want to do is they want to be free to engage in all of their lustful desires and things like that. So you'll mostly find that people who have a belief in things, I shouldn't say mostly, but very, very often, people who profess to not believe in God, it's really not their intellect pushing them, we've discussed this many times, but rather their desire to do things that they shouldn't necessarily be doing. Okay, so we talked about the golden calf. We pointed out how when you go through the Psukim, you go through the Parsha, really they were not trying to worship it as a god. That's clear from the Ramban. Aaron did everything he could to slow them down. The reason he didn't tell them to stop right away was because they just murdered his nephew for trying to do the same thing. Also, we pointed out it was the Erev Rav, this group of Egyptians that were coming with them to start up. And we said that they were looking, really was coming from a good place, because they wanted to have a vehicle to connect to Hashem. And like the Beis Halevi said, their mistake was, even though they had good motivations, you don't make cheshbonos, you just follow what the Torah says, and this is something that they shouldn't have been doing, and we take that lesson for our own life and be good. And no one on the way home, don't go to Wendy's and have a bacon cheeseburger, okay? Promise? Great.
It still doesn't sound too bad when they, after what I just